Advisory Board member.
Sport and Commerce Advisory Board member.
Excuse me. To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, welcome aboard.
Yep.
Okay.
And just, there you go. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Chair, we don't need a roll. You do have a quorum.
Okay. So our work session today is to discuss the progress and status of the ad hoc heat loop committee, which was founded or formed by PACAB to advocate for a heat loop project. And how, I know Ben and Linda were here. I'm not sure whether Dwayne or Tom have been abreast with what this is about.
I'd like to get more information.
Sure. Well, that's we're going to talk about it just a little bit, and I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll pass around for you guys just to look at. I'm going to start with the rookie down here, but that's a map, and I am then going to turn the chair over to Vice Chair PACAB and join the audience. And Daryl, if it's going to be you and me for the heat loop group. Okay.
Chair with him.
BYOC.
Yeah, chair will travel. Oh gosh. Which one do you want? This one's higher. It's easier to sit in.
All right, I'll take the high chair. I'm not bashful these days. Put in the other on, you know, you have to do. Oh, there you go.
They won't stay up. That's why one of the reasons I got rid of them. Okay. So there are to the PACAB board. There are 7 of us on the ad hoc group.
Okay, let me interrupt.
Sure.
Bruce, you are the chair of PACAB. You can speak to the heat loop committee from your seat. You don't need to be in the audience.
Can't I be?
It's really inappropriate. You are the chair of PACAB, and you're welcome to speak to the heat loop committee as a member of it, but you are presiding over this work session.
I pass the gavel to vice chair.
Okay,
You can do that.
go for it.
Yeah. Anyway, there are 7 of us on the group. Daryl and I, Mary Tugas, Mike Brown, Bob Linville, Javante Weddington, and Griffin Plush. Griffin and Javante are Seward grads. Mike Brown has been around the community for a long, long time. And I think Bob Linville is a former PACAB member. And Mary, of course, has advocated for both the library and for this group. This effort sprang out of 2 things. It's sort of a confluence of things, and Daryl can correct me because he's got a different history or better history on one side of it. But the library has had an ongoing problem with cost of operation, which includes their heat plants, as well as some maintenance costs and problems with the system. About the same time, the Sea Life Center was developing a heat loop system, a heat exchanger system, and their consultant engineer more or less developed the idea that there was another heat source available for the library. And from that, there got to be a an application to the Alaska Energy Authority for a grant, which was a matching grant, to develop a project that would include a test well, data collection, and eventual construction. The original budget was around $1 million. When the estimates came in to develop the project, it came in significantly higher. For a variety of reasons, then the project did not get built. In the interim years, the money that was allocated by Alaska Energy Authority has been maintained and still is available. Efforts of the administration to get the AEA to extend that grant through the end of 2023, I believe, have more or less secured that $700,000 or so. With the city currently having invested about $150,000. This group was formed to look for other options for money. And the first obvious thing that came up was a grant through the Department of Energy, which is what they call a FOA, funding opportunity something.
Announcement.
What?
Announcement.
Announcement. And we did apply for that, and we were selected as one of 11 across the country, 11 award recipients for phase one. Phase one to us is currently budgeted at around $315,000, which is to be used for preparation and development of the system. The phase two grant, for those applicants who complete phase one successfully, I don't know if there's a second selection process or whether we would automatically move into being eligible for phase two money, which is more money for construction. Currently, this building, the sheet I passed around, Tom may have looked at it, I don't know if it got over to Dwayne yet, but the project as conceived today is a 4-building project. The library, which is a modern radiant heat system with a high temperature system for air handlers. They're actually a complicated mechanical heating system in the library because of books and other things. But it would handle the load in the library. The annex, the old library, this City Hall building, and the fire company as currently structured. There would be residual heat that would be available for potential sidewalk heating as well. That is the project that this group has advocated for. It's the project that most of the people we've talked to are interested in. One of the terms of this grant is that it provide heat to 25% of the city's buildings. And if you consider all the properties that the city of Seward owns, these 4 buildings do constitute more than 25%. So it was necessary to keep that in mind for this particular grant. And with that, I will say that I think most of us on this group think that there are other grant opportunities out there that we continue to look for. This is the one this is the bird in the hand right now.
This started, I think, the idea that started back in 2015, so it's been around for quite a while. We commissioned the CO2 refrigerant heat pump system in 2016 at the Sea Life Center, which consisted of heat loops and 4 Mayacal 20-ton CO2 refrigerant heat pumps, which were installed and commissioned in 2016. Ann and I started looking at another iteration of this type of system, using, instead of taking seawater directly as the source, putting in ground source wells, basically, right along the waterfront. And there was a test well that was done. The city funded that before any application was made for any money. That was funded, and Andy did a feasibility study on that with city systems, and the well proved successful to the first purposes, and so the project went forward in the application phase to get money to design and theoretically to build, but of course, the way state grants so typically run, by the time you do your study and your design, by the time you get funding, usually several years transpire in that process, and that's what happened with this project. The state didn't fund that round of Alaska Energy projects that were selected, and the city's project was selected, I think, number 2 out of the entire state for priority. But there was no money appropriated. A couple of years later, that I happened to be meeting with Governor Walker at the Sea Life Center, and he turned around and I mentioned that the city had this project that had been selected, and so he, in the next year, proceeded to put money, the $725,000, in his budget as a specific request, and that's how the funding came about that was received. But so many years have transpired, and then COVID hit. We all know what happened to the economy. We all know the cost of everything just skyrocketed by that time, and so project costs got much higher than what was originally anticipated for the project, and so that's where we are basically today as far as moving forward. We're excited about being selected. Out of 50 in the nation that were applied for this money, there was 11 that were identified for this phase 1 funding. Bruce said it's around $335,000 will city contribution for the first phase, which consists of primarily, I think, finishing up the design, getting the design truly ready for bid. We all recognize that there's work that still needs to be done on that. And then also there's a piece in there for community participation involvement that's geared towards setting up a program with AvTech to help put in place training on heat pump systems, primarily probably doing with air source that we know is becoming more common here in Seward. I have one in my home, but I think that the new iteration now is to go to the high temperature CO2 refrigerant heat pumps, because they're using natural refrigerant that's not harmful to the environment, and they generate heat temperatures up to 190 degrees, which will work for most building applications. So that's, as Bruce said, that's what we're looking at here. Stephen's been instrumental in this whole project in getting us here, and the city staff and working this along, and helping the heating committee with this process. Bruce mentioned other funding possibilities. We were excited to learn that the city did include this project as one of its requested projects for earmark funding in this next cycle of federal budget, and Congressman Peltola has requested, as part of her request, no guarantees that the current makeup of Congress what they're going to fund in their budget. They're in a budget cutting mode, as we know, from at least the House side. But it's possible that would be included in the federal capital budget for funding this year, and that would be absolutely fantastic, I think, if that would occur. But that's just an opportunity. It's not. There's nothing for sure on that. There's nothing for sure guaranteed that we'll be successful in the next round of this. But we feel pretty positive, because this was ranked pretty high. There seems to be a lot of interest And the project has a federal partner in this, in the National Renewable Energy Lab, which has an office up in Fairbanks. They're actually one of the participants, one of the, I guess, sub-grantees on this project. In fact, they have a substantial part of this first phase. Pretty exciting, I think.
That's an interesting component to me. The federal government takes out of wherever they get their money, and they take it out of this pocket and they put it into this pocket. But that's in fact what NREL, National Research Renewable Energy, is about. And what they will do, one of the things that makes this project interesting to them is its uniqueness. As Darrell said, the heat source is a very benign, the way of extracting the heat is very benign. Its impact on the environment is almost nil. Where the Sea Life Center draws in large amounts of seawater, and there's a certain disruption that some people consider drastic. This has nothing like that. You know, once it's put in the ground, you walk over the top of the structure along the beach without harm.
Wouldn't know it's there.
It'll be undercover, essentially under a sidewalk, if you will. And because of the components that the CO2, and Ben is familiar with the advent of CO2, it gives new possibilities. So the NREL is very excited about modeling, and unfortunately, in my opinion, they take a big piece of this. They got $200,000 currently of this 335,000. And the reason for those two numbers is it depends on where you use match. In the dollar numbers that we actually have to work with would be 315,000. And of that, the 200 to NREL, another amount to Your Clean Energy, and some to Avtech. We're currently in what the federal government calls a negotiation phase, which takes 6 months. Meetings 2 times a month for about an hour each. And they're not negotiations like most of us consider. This is fine tuning. It's actually fine tuning the grant. It's finding out where, I think, correct me, Stephen, you're probably a lot more familiar with this. You and Darrell probably seen grants. I have no clue. But they're looking at each entry and saying, is this correct? Do you attest to this? Are you still there? Is there need to be a correction? And frankly, we're brand new to this. We had our first joint meeting with them last week. I think after the dust settles a little bit and we all learn a little bit, there may be some things that we can do to advantage our local participant, which is Avtech. But it's still a little bit new. Now, I think we've sort of presented the overall of what this particular project is about, what we've done to move it along. We definitely work under the administration of PACAB. And PACAB is essentially, with the city, PACAB made a recommendation to the city council, which acknowledged this group's existence through the end of 2023. I would not be surprised that this group comes back in the fall of 2023 and asks to extend. There are things happening in this project that may find application in other areas, but that's water. That's down the road. So I would be open to any questions, particularly from anybody, administration, or the board.
I have a question, maybe going back a little bit, but when Mr. Andy Baker and Mr. Schiffermeyer and others were looking at this potential test well location, I assume that was a strategic point. It's down at the base of Adams, and I guess is in alignment with other city buildings. But my question is there any other intercept point or something that can be brought into a system close by that we could bootstrap, like the bathrooms or shower houses or anything, just to get it started?
One of the things, there was city did receive some money as a grant or a gift from a local lady prior to passing away, I think, to install another shower facility along the waterfront. And there was some thought, and Andy actually put this in his initial concept, to provide the heat for that shower facility. That would, but it kind of depends on where the shower facility would go. There was talk that it would go clear down Williams Park, which is quite a ways from where this system would go, so that makes a difference on that. I don't know where that project stands as far as.
It's still in the closet.
Going.
So with the city, it was Sue Canta donated the money. So she donated the money, and the city bought those, they're not portable bathroom, but it's on the skid bathrooms, all ADA approved to be set down into Williams Park. So it's just needs to be set. We're working on through some logistics on it.
And you're plumbing it in and providing.
Plumbing it in,
So
water,
that's where that
sewer,
would
and
go.
there'll be, it won't be open in the winter, but.
But, I mean, there could be a similar brought down, maybe perhaps another, there's money available to put another shower facility down here, and this would then be something to answer the question that could go in there. I don't know if there's other city projects or facilities that could, this design for 4 buildings would take, I think, 26 wells, 200-foot depth to, won't be encased wells, obviously have to encase what you're building, but the cases will be pulled up, this will use
Slurry.
well, it's using it's using a piping system that has double in each well.
It's a loop, it's a PEX loop,
Yeah.
essentially.
High efficiency. Use either a glycol or some other media to pick up the temperature, and that will be pumped back up to the library where the heat pumps will be located. And for 4 buildings, there'll be at least 5, maybe 6 heat pumps, depending on the size. Now, these have come quite a ways as far as there's companies in the United States that are now manufacturing these. Most of them now are done on a rack system instead of a modular, like Sea Life Center. More than likely, this would be put in a rack CO2 system, and then what media is used will be dependent upon that. And then the CO2 is the refrigerant that's used, and it's one exciting thing about CO2 is it'll lift from all the way. It doesn't have to go in stages or anything like all the refrigerants. It can take a fairly low temperature and go all the way up to the 190. Very efficient that way. It's not harmful to the environment. Tons of CO2. This uses a high-grade CO2, which can use regular soda pop CO2. We've used it at Sea Life Center actually, and we couldn't get the other. Works fine, and it's inexpensive, and not harmful, and it's good. It's a good medium for
To the Boardman Ratwood's question, the site was obviously, as you say, relevant to the library in Adams Street, but it was also positioned in a way that would test the aquifer, what was there. The Corps of Engineers, after the '64 earthquake, modeled the entire waterfront, and they found, and your dock used to be there along there, and everybody else's, but they found that there's a very thick layer of fine gravel, close to 300 feet deep, and essentially the plinth, or the rock structure that dives down into the ocean, starts back up the hill quite a way. So the whole beachfront area, clear from the location of Renson Park or down all the way along the waterfront, clear back to the small boat harbor, is the same kind of structure. I used your clean energy numbers for how much heat could be extracted out of that gravel in a cross-section, and estimated that by extending it along the waterfront at the same intervals of wells, which would go through the RV park and all that business, again, it would be innocuous after construction, could heat close to 100, I think it's 130 homes, average 1,500 square foot homes. So there's an enormous heat reservoir potential there. To utilize the backflow, you know, as Darrell said, that you're circulating a liquid, probably glycol, and it can be a very friendly glycol. It doesn't have to be like in your car radiator. It can be food grade glycol even. Yeah, and the returning product still has a lot of heat in it. That's what would be used for potential sidewalk heating. It could be also used for the kind of things that you're talking about. If you had a structure at Branson Pavilion that was right next to it, you could easily extract enough heat to keep it somewhat warm. Again, it would close in the winter. I don't know that anybody really needs it in the winter. There's a great opportunity, and that was presented to the grant people here, and it's one that's on our radar. We have, just for your information, I'm not sure I've got the right book. I got so many books. This was a May 1 agenda. We had a good attendance. We talked about a lot of things. We're having meetings. We had a short hiatus, but we're having meetings at least once a month, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. We sort of let it go through the holiday season, and while this grant was sort of developing, sort of letting the seed germinate, and now we're back to it again. And with the attention that we're having to give the negotiation period, I think that we'll renew our search for additional grant opportunities.
I don't know how much of you, any of you are familiar with, you know, of course, the Sea Life Center is kind of the early adopter of using seawater in Ocean Bay to heat its facility, and it does substantially. There's been issues with some of the equipment. I won't kid you there. It's new stuff, and there's not a lot of folks that are trained in operating it, but there are becoming more so. But the Resurrection Bay has the equivalent of, because it recharges every year, and the bay gets the warmest in November, and then it starts cooling down over the winter months. Believe it or not, it's warmest in the wintertime, and so that's very ideal for what we're talking about here. You need the heat, as in, of course, in the cool months. The studies that were done on the bay before we ever did anything at the Sea Life Center actually is what I'm doing again. There's enough energy renewal in Resurrection Bay because of its depth and its tides, equivalent to what's pumped out of Prudhoe Bay annually, believe it or not. It warps people's brains when you talk about that kind of thing, but it's there. So there's a substantial ability, reservoir, to do a lot of heat in this community with that system. Now, it's going to be expensive because you have to put in like in this case, wells. You have to run the piping around the community. We actually looked at, Andy and I, kind of a layout of running some loops that would go up to the hospital. Looking at some of the large buildings that are in the community, Aptech, hospital, government primary buildings, but large buildings to start with. It's like anything. You have to get people to adopt and want to do something. And you know, people don't understand, they don't comprehend how something like this can provide heat. And I used to take people down to basically my center, put their hands on that piping, and it would burn them. Literally, say, well, feel it, it's hot, it's 180 degrees or more. And kind of, when they see that, they can kind of get, that's how Governor Walker got the vision. I took him down there, put his hand on the pipe, said, feel that.
Nice guy.
Yeah, feel that. And he was amazed when he saw what that does. Because you can stick your hand in the cold refreshing bay of water and it, hurts, it's cold. But then with these refrigerants, they boil at a very, very low temperature and generate all that heat. Right now, I'm heating my whole house with a heat pump. I heat it probably 6-7 months of the year, totally. It's just a heat pump, one air source heat pump. I have a split level house and it's kind of weird layout. I'm a believer in the system. It can save people money. Because what it does is you get, like most of these heat pumps now are so efficient, you get 3 and 4 units of energy for every unit of electricity that you use for them. So I don't have a real high electric bill using that system because it's so efficient. This would even be much more so efficient.
If I might, one of the things that we have regularly run into is the cost of this system versus the return. And obviously, as Daryl said, things cost a lot of money, but Prudhoe Bay costs a lot of money to build. I was there, I know how much money it cost them. But it was something they needed to do, and they did it. And in the long run, it pays off. So how does this project pay off? We're asked that all the time. I personally put in a solar project that will not pay off in my lifetime, but it will pay off. And it's paying off regularly, daily. The other side, we're in an interesting time with the carbon reduction. All the way up to the federal government level, people are talking carbon reduction. I think that many of us wonder how that's all going to be achieved. This is a small step along the way, very small. Is it significant? If this was broadly distributed, it would have a major impact. So where does it start? It starts with something like that. That's one of the benefits that we have in sewer. This is a pilot project. And the return, as Daryl said, it has to do with the efficiency of the equipment. You're not inventing anything. You're moving something from one place to another. You're taking it out of Resurrection Bay and putting it into this building. And the cost of doing that, in this case, is electricity. But once you get the equipment, it's electricity. And that electricity is generally more carbon friendly, not 100%, it's not zero. And it's also cheaper. And I think the numbers that we're talking about displacing in between 10 and 12,000 gallons of diesel a day, a year, between these buildings. So that's $50,000 or $60,000 a year over 10 years. That's $500,000 or more.
Stephen?
Thank you, Vice Chair Paquette. A three specific questions regarding the maintenance plan, if I may. Pick Board Member Smith's brain a little bit. One of the things that came up on our Monday follow-up call with the ad hoc committee was the maintenance plan. The Department of Energy during the phase 1 is going to require not a full maintenance plan, but an outline of what the maintenance plan would look like. So that's going to be an urgent need that we need to respond back to DOE by the 25th of this month. And so if I may, I have three specific questions. One, could the Sea Life Center share the maintenance plan for its system with the ad hoc committee?
We can, yes. There's two distinct heat pump systems. One is a more conventional system that we have a service contract with. The other one is the CO2 ones, which we've been doing annual PMs on that, but I don't think there's a formal service contract to my knowledge. So I would say that, that's something that the manufacturer of whatever product is selected, whatever they recommend, I would highly advise is what you go with.
Yeah.
Maintain the warranties and the efficiencies that way.
That would definitely be helpful. So, to your point, we don't have the exact system designed yet,
No.
but looking at the format of your maintenance plan is something that DOE wants to see ahead of time. It's kind of one of those things I think they're just trying to get us to think down the road about.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to look at the terms of the contract on the chiller plant, but we should be able to share that. And,
Okay.
yeah.
If you could send it to Bruce, that would be beneficial.
Okay.
And then as a follow-up to that, can you kind of describe the maintenance of these types of systems?
Well, so our system uses raw seawater, and this heat loop project avoids that. And to me, that's a huge selling point, because anybody that owns a boat knows about raw seawater, and the Sea Life Center is basically an inside-out boat. There's a lot of maintenance associated with pumping and heat exchanger, cleaning plates, strainers, things like that. So this system avoids that cost, which I think is huge. And we're actually looking at variations of this theme for the center currently because of the added expense of the seawater system. So does that help?
Yeah, that definitely helps.
Okay.
What's our local body of knowledge, and by local I mean South Central Alaska,
For
maintenance?
You'd have to look at the system as components. The hydronic portions of it, yeah, it's a general HVAC mechanical services company could deal with any of that. The compressors themselves are highly specialized, and you're going to have to rely on the factory, the vendor for that support.
Thank you.
Having built and operated the
Yeah.
system, I can speak to that quite a bit. It's been a few years since I've been there and been intimately involved with that since then, but Ben's right. You have to look at what the manufacturer recommends for the heat pumps themselves. They're the most technical part. The rest of it's just
Pipes.
mechanical, plumbing, heating stuff like Bruce built and installed. Sea Life Center is a little bit more exotic in that it's got the seawater system and all that jazz, and made it more complex and more involved and more prone to problems. The problem the Sea Life Center has is the fact that it sits right next to that waterfall down there and mountain slides that fall off into the bay, and it substantially impacts the water quality coming into the center.
Yes.
And that affects your heat pumps and your heat exchangers and all that stuff. That's been the most difficult thing I think the Sea Life Center's had in keeping the system running, is the effect on the heat exchangers, which are critical in that system design. There's not going to be heat exchangers. There's heat exchangers inside each of the heat pumps themselves, but you don't have to be doing what. That's why we came up with this scheme to use deep wells and just the tidal influence coming in and out. Then that avoids all that stuff, pumping and all that complication that the Sea Life Center has to deal with. But nonetheless, it's
This system would have a better COP than the Sea Life Center because of that, those savings.
The development in the equipment is making huge strides, huge strides. It's one of the reasons that I think YCE was not specific in a particular model of compressor heat pump system, because they're between the time that the Sea Life Center units were put in 7 years ago and today, it's astronomical. Even in the last year, there are 3 or 4 domestic manufacturers of this type of equipment, some better than others, and it's growing. So there's an energy conference in Washington, D.C. in June that YCE is going as a participant, I believe, a presenter, not part of this project necessarily. But Griffin Plush from our group has been sent donations, no cost. Our ad hoc group is not in a position where we can expend any money. We're not authorized for that, so.
Other than what we individually contributed, no?
Yeah, what we individually contributed will get Griffin back there where the heat pump people are. And if nothing else, he'll have great exposure and learn a lot that he can then represent back to us. We're going to let the technical people do their technical work, but as a group, we are going to try to oversee what they do. I'm a little bit of a wonk. I'm trying to make sure money's spent in a reasonable way, call it that. I've seen four-wheel drive garbage trucks in the bush where there's no roads. I don't want to see that here. You know, so.
Speaking of money spent, can the National Renewable Energy Lab, do they have a proposal for the type of modeling or?
Yes.
They do. That's one of the big pieces they're going to do, modeling this. Actually, they're doing some good survey of the design, of the layout, which is very helpful to have. When we did the design, we didn't have money to do that. That's one of the things that they're going to bring to the party, as it were, and also modeling of the design.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if I could see some of that at some point.
Well, you will.
And,
Board Member Smith, that's one of the purposes of the DOE, and specific to our goals, is that this information be broadly disseminated. That the modeling that NERL is going to do, they're buying a very expensive addition to a current program. There's some brain computer somewhere, and they're going to buy a $40,000 or $50,000 program that goes with it.
We need a supercomputer.
Yeah.
Punch the numbers.
finite element analysis.
In talking to YCE about this, I did mention that, you know, it's a little scary in a way that they're going to have to prove the calculations that were sort of done on a laptop or a knee pad. But we both feel very comfortable that his approach is conservative and that the actual modeling will show a better result. And that will be very public. And that's a nice thing. I mean, again, this is what the Department of Energy is trying to do. This is not specific to Seward, Alaska. This is something that would benefit any community that has a resource like this. And if you think around the world, there are a lot of places, maybe not with a tidal holdover like Resurrection Bay, but still the water is warmer than the air in the winter.
Is it, I'm probably way out of my pay grade here, but is it necessary to put in 20-something 250-foot wells? I have property on an alluvial fan, and I can't even put in septic systems without weighing them down because they turn into buoys. They'll pop out at high tide. And I've got a few heat pumps, and I really like them. I'm a big fan of them. But I've actually talked to people about a heat pump for a pavilion that I want to build. And we realized that because my groundwater, which was the same as there, it's sifting through the tide. Like they talked about just putting the loops 10 or 15 feet down, because it's all, you know, I'll dig and I'll watch the high tide come up to where it's like 2-3 feet from the top. Then it goes away at low tide. So you have this brackish, like sifted thermal mass.
We could share this, but I recommend you look at the design memorandum that was done by Andy Baker that takes all the information from the test well and calculation. Now, with the modeling that Bruce is talking about here, that we're talking about, that could be greatly refined. Perhaps it will suggest you don't need as many wells to do, but I think, you know, the design is conservative. You don't want to miss that.
Well, actually, the model and the test well they put in there came back with some really kind of interesting information. I think, who was the engineer? Was it Stefan?
Well, Stefan Nielsen did
Was involved with it, but first of all, where we're located is somewhat of the outwater of Lowell Canyon.
Okay.
So you have a subsurface water, a band of subsurface water that is somewhat cold because it's coming down out of a glacier and feeds through there. So reaching through that belt of cool water, you get into a warmer water. And the wells are actually planned to be drilled 300 feet with the loop put in at 240 feet and then backfilled with slurry. As the steel casing's pulled, that will stay in the ground. The gravel is very porous, and because you're down below that cooler band of subsurface water, you're into the warm water that washes in and out of Resurrection Bay.
Okay.
So the modeling shows that. Now, could it be, I have friends that have horizontal heat loop systems, ground source. That's not quite the model we're looking at here.
That answers the question.
But I think Darrell's right. The neural investigation may refine that a little bit and may find that a closer spaced wells at a shallower depth or slightly farther apart, I think they'll come up with something.
Yeah, I know the closer I get to the ocean, the less the ground freezes and how deep it is, so it's always about 40
Your
degrees.
email, Tom, I can get you the design memorandum. It's not a difficult read, but it's got, color and it's got drawings and stuff like that.
I think the clerk actually has put that on PACAB
Okay.
site. It could probably be found.
I know I put in a well that was 370 feet deep 2 years ago, and it was almost $40,000, so.
Well, that was one of the expenses early in this project.
Yeah.
That is something that we have people in the community that have had some experience with it, but I'm going to say, I don't mean to upset anyone about it, but there are people around the state who have developed that technology and reduced the price.
That'd be great.
Yeah, this test well was $26,000.
But it was a learning curve,
Yeah,
mostly because they're extracting the steel casing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Go ahead,
one other question. You mentioned Lowell Canyon and that cold water source. There was some work on a potential hydro project, and was that dovetailing with this to provide the energy for the heat loop system?
Only wish it were. It's the same, it's based on the same kind of movement through subsoil gravel. That's the only similarity. The temperature of that water wasn't considered. I mean, you can go out and say that after you run water through a turbine of some sort, it's warmed up, let's extract that heat again. But it was never two completely separate things. And that project still has legs.
I just imagine a green source of electricity to run the heat loop system. That's
Oh gosh, wouldn't that be wonderful? Well, as a matter of fact, I'm looking at a heat pump right now that's solar powered. So, I mean, I don't know how far you can go with this stuff, but everything's a trade-off. Where we're at, everything's trade-offs, and you have to actually look if it's energy efficient. That's one thing. If it's carbon friendly, that's another.
Andy will always say there's no free lunch. There's absolutely no free lunch in anything you do here. And one of the challenges is we all know what fuel oil went to here in the last 2 or 3 years, and it boomed up over $5 a gallon for a while, and then it's back down. I don't know what people are paying because I don't.
Pulling back up.
I don't buy fuel oil. I'm an electric guy, my place, and so that's why I like the heat pump. But our electric rates are not easy here for a new project like this because they're expensive. But that's the challenge throughout anywhere in the rail belt or anywhere in Alaska. Our electric rates are pretty high, and they're not ever going to get any better than they are now. I don't care what utility you're dealing with, they're not gonna get any cheaper. So that's one thing you have to look at, is the cost of the electricity. That makes a difference on affordability.
And against that, one of the things that's intangible, you cannot measure what benefits you'd get from 3,000 tourists that get off a couple of cruise ships that learn that the critical buildings in downtown sewer are heated with a renewable and a carbon-free or carbon-reduced source. I mean, that's incalculable. I think it has great merit. And if I were in the business of promoting, tourism, that would be right on top of it.
We talk, you hear all the talk, government setting goals that by 2040, 2050, we're gonna have all electric cars, and it ain't gonna happen. I mean, it's a nice goal, but it's just simply not gonna happen. Particularly, it's not gonna happen universally across the country, because they just don't work well in certain climes, and there's challenges. But it will substantially get there, and the same with this kind of thing. You have to be, somebody's got to adopt the technology and move forward. I get really impatient with all the talk that we're doing green. Well, unless you're doing it, you're not doing it.
Right.
You've got to take the steps, and this is a step for sewer. We don't have good quality wind here. Hydro's very limited in our area, unfortunately. We wish we could be a Kodiak and have a, Terra Lake facility and wind turbines up on the hill and all that good stuff. But most communities in Alaska, most communities in America are not going to have that mix of capability. So we have to adopt what we do have. And this is what Seward has. We have this beautiful bay out here that has lots of energy in it. We just got to tap it. Like Tom was saying, he's experiencing some of the stuff that Seward can provide.
Put a picture that you guys see looking out across the bay on the right condition, and you see all that vapor coming off the bay. And think about that in terms of the flare stacks in Prudhoe Bay. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but they'll warm a 10-acre area around the base of one of those stacks. They're giving off a lot of heat. This bay is equal to that.
We did a video of the Sea Life Center system. In fact, there's been, the news media has done a couple of different videos. They're all available on YouTube. But one of them was called Icy Heat. It was narrated by Jason grew up here, passed away last 2 years ago. He was a broadcaster.
Jason Moore.
Jason Moore, yeah, he was my neighbor, in fact. He lived behind my house. And I knew his dad well. But he narrated it. It's worth looking at.
Give the title again.
Icy Heat.
Icy Heat.
And I think we can share some of that. There's like 2 or 3 different videos, short videos that were done on the Sea Life Center systems. Kind of interesting stuff.
So I have a question, and it's really tangential to the whole heat loop conversation, but I'm curious, does the Sea Life Center have in its future a thought to move away from the seawater solution to a non-seawater heat pump solution, since the seawater seems to cause so much trouble?
So, yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So one of the options we're looking at is similar to how a larger boat uses keel coolers. We have a lot of water that's sitting in tanks that we can exchange heat with. It would be possibly more accessible. There's a lot of limitations in how we can approach those projects. Air source is competitive now, I think, at certain times of the year. So there might be some possibility of blending some different systems. Even looking at this, even if there's accessible groundwater nearby, it might be feasible to use a combination of wells and
So add Sea Life Center to the list of buildings on the
Well-
cover sheet.
Yeah, maybe we could share the loop.
Well, I mean, that's why I brought it up.
Everything's possible with money.
Right, right,
Gotta get this one off the ground.
right.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if the idea of including the Sea Life Center as a possibility gives this more teeth, right? Like, you've done it this way, and this would even be a better way.
The cost of getting that, there's not enough capacity there for the center's needs.
Okay.
I think it's a matter of, and I'm not an expert at this, but the people we've talked to that look at grants a lot, the size of the grants available, the roughly $5 million project, give or take. You know, finding grant opportunities for that amount of money is a pretty big challenge. Now, Representative Petula may be able to change that formula, and we'll see. We'll see how. I think this week may tell a lot.
Yeah, see if we can avoid a major meltdown to fall, that'll knock us all in a tailspin. I mean, that's,
We can go into that later.
that's what we're all looking at right now. I think, at least I am, I don't know if the rest of you are, you gotta be.
Yeah.
One of the things that some locals are looking at now, along with, I guess, the borough maintenance engineers, is putting in some kind of a ground system for heating the school.
Right,
Pool.
The pool, track,
right.
while they're redoing the track, so, and that's gonna take a bit of investment of money to look at. I mean, I've long felt that the way the schools are laid out there, the fact that we're on that pretty good ground source aquifer up there, albeit it's cold water, it's not really warm. But you can be pretty cold water and still extract quite a bit of energy out of it. Look at putting in a heat with all three schools. Because we constantly hear when we go to the borough that these three schools cost more than most of the rest of schools put together. Because they don't have natural gas that they all benefit from. Even Homer has natural gas now. And so we always get threatened, they're gonna shut the pool down, they're gonna, do draconian stuff. And this is possibly a way that can be taken out of the equation down the road. But it's gonna take the borough to have some interest and be willing to invest some money to make it happen.
Is your committee prepared to take on a second project?
Yes. Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, we've talked about all these things.
Yeah,
In fact, one of our members specifically brought it to us, Bob Linville, because he was up at the meeting that they had recently at the school. I don't know if anybody from the city was there. But it's getting some discussion, some traction. Very early days. And there would have to be money put in to do a feasibility study, do a test well or two, model it, see what it showed, come up with calculations of how many wells it would take to do what size of system and then all that. And then it's just a civil engineering and mechanical engineering design project that's straightforward.
so how do we get that first step moving? Because to me, it's a little complicated because it's the borough schools, even though they're inside the city limits. But
Start with Peter Machicky.
Well, he's enthusiastic for it, but
Yeah.
the money comes from the state. The state doesn't even want to pay for teachers and books.
But this could be a project the borough could go after, some Alaska Energy Authority project.
But I think your committee is in the perfect position to try and leverage that to get it going.
We cannot expend money.
No, I know you
Some of
can't
that
expend
requires,
money.
some study.
Right. But getting the borough to spend the money on the study.
I think our committee is willing to try to identify some of that, but I don't think we're really in a position to get very far into it.
We need to talk with Cindy Eklund, she's obviously our representative.
Right.
See if she can get the vision. I think Cindy could get the vision and do it. She saw
Our meetings are noticed, publicly noticed, and I think that we'd be happy to include, an item that you or someone in the public want to bring to us. We've been pretty much laser focused on what's right in front of us.
Right, except that as I keep hearing, these threats about shutting the pool down and all of that, I mean, I think
We hear it too.
we need to,
Peter said, Mayor McChickey says that they'll close the pool over his dead body. So I don't think that's immediately going to happen. However many years he's got in that office, I think we're probably safe. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't look for better sources, ways to save everybody money, because that's taxpayer money.
right,
It's gonna take somebody to get behind it, like with Chicky, to actually figure out where they can come up with the money to study it, do the feasibility. And then if that proves out, drill a well or two, test it, it looks feasible, then go after some funding.
Just by the way, Neural has included in their modeling, somewhat on their own, a photovoltaic component to this.
okay.
It's not something that our group advocated for, but they did. So that would be, that research from any kind of data collection along the waterfront would be applicable to a place like the school as well, or any place that gets that same exposure.
Anybody else on the dais have questions or comments? Or?
Thank you for your support.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mentioned that PACAB has a joint meeting with council on the 22nd. So I would assume that our minutes from this meeting will get into there. Your minutes from this meeting. Thanks, Darrell.
I don't know if minutes were being taken, but.
They are.
I don't know, really?
I take notes, not minutes.
Well, we can make it.
They are delivered to council.
We'll make it. All right?
All right, you're gonna come back and close it
No.
out? I'm gonna close it out? Anything else? Do we need it to cover anything else, Brenda?
I guess this is the last meeting of the year,
Yeah.
because I do need it to come up there.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Darrell.
I'm just gonna sit right here.
And I apologize, I have my phone on Do Not Disturb, and I do have a couple of staff members that are allowed to break through, so that was what was happening. Phone going off.
All right. Okay, very good. Well, we'll go around the room and take some last comments. This is our last meeting of the year before the summer hiatus. That's correct, right?
It is, yeah.
And our next meeting is,
September,
6th, maybe, is the first Wednesday in September.
9/6. Vessel and property tax, AML attendance.
and maybe some,
So we'll go ahead and start. I'll let Tom speak last. Board member Atwood.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I would just like to extend thanks to the Chair Jaffa and to Mr. Schaefer-Meyer for providing that report. I actually learned a lot, and thank you.
And Board member Smith.
It's really impressive work from the ad hoc committee there. This project is, from my perspective, a very feasible, effective solution. I really hope it gets some wings here. And if you're looking at heat pumps, the railroad dock there definitely would be an easy place to heat with a heat pump. Just throw that out there. Thank you.
Board member Miller.
I don't have much to say. I'm a big fan of heat pumps. I've got a couple of them in my buildings, and they've got basically about a 3 or 4 year return as far as I can tell before I'm saving money, so. Between the footprint and just the money side of it, that's great. That's
Okay. Vice Chair Paquette.
thank you to Daryl and Bruce, for your report about the committee. So we still have one empty seat to fill for next year, is that right? No?
Not until after July.
Not till after July, but still, we're going on hiatus, so when we come back, we'll still have one seat that needs filling, and thank you for, Tom, for putting in. So, I hope everybody has a good summer. I think it's going to be a little more challenging than some people were thinking, but I hope we all have a good summer.
Okay, well, I hope we're up to the challenges. I think we can. I think we will. Again, thank Tom for putting in. I think you'll find there's both frustration and joy from what you do. But overall, we have great support from administration, and our new acting mayor or manager has been very active as our harbor master. We spend a lot of time with harbor activities and continue to do that. And I really appreciate this board, the diversity of backgrounds that they bring to the conversation. And I will continue to serve until I can find a replacement. I will put in this again this year, but there must be somebody out there that thinks they can pin my ears back. I'd be happy for that. Other than that, we'll adjourn. 1:09.
See you.